The night she didn't close the door, the sky had that heavy kind of silence that only came after a long storm.
Ow.
Rainwater still clung to the curbs and roofs. The streets were dark and quiet, but one car moved slowly, its headlights soft and steady, as if it didn't want to disturb the stillness. Inside, Keanu Reeves sat behind the wheel. He wasn't in a hurry. He never was when it came to her. His hands rested calmly on the steering wheel, but his eyes were carrying something. Something quiet, something heavy. He'd just finished a long shoot downtown, the kind that left your soul tired even more than your body. But instead of going home, instead of turning toward the hills where his house waited in silence, he turned the car in the other direction, toward the small house she sometimes forgot she owned. The one with a chipped blue door and a porch light that always flickered twice before it. When out, Ana de Armas hadn't spoken to him in 5 days. Not because of anger, not because of pride, but because something in her heart had folded inward, and she didn't know how to unfold it again. And Keanu, he wasn't coming to fix her. He wasn't coming to give answers or ask questions. He was just coming to stand at the door, because he knew what it felt like when the world got too loud inside your head. When everything spun, even though you were sitting still. He parked under the street lamp. It cast a pale gold over the hood of his car, like a promise not to speak too loud. He stepped out slowly, pulling his coat closer as the cool air touched his skin. It was late, past midnight. But he didn't even look at the time. He walked to the house without making a sound. He didn't knock, he rang the bell. He just stood there, in front of that chipped blue door, and that's when he saw it. The lock was open, the handle had been turned, and the door wasn't closed all the way. She had left it that way, not by mistake, but on purpose. Ana had left the door unlocked. A small sign, a quiet message. It didn't mean come in, but it also didn't mean stay away. Keanu stood still, breathing in the night air, letting the meaning of that small gesture settle into him. He didn't push the door open. He didn't step inside. Instead, he slowly sat down on the porch, his back against the wooden frame, his eyes looking out over the sleeping street. He pulled his coat tighter and waited inside the house. Ana sat in the dark. She was on the floor of her living room, her back against the old couch, her knees pulled close. No lights, no sound, just the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the ticking of the wall clock above the hallway. She had cried earlier, but now she wasn't crying. She was just breathing, quietly, trying to stay whole. She knew he would come. She didn't expect him to knock, and she didn't want him to leave either. They hadn't fought. Not really, but something had changed. Slowly, quietly. Like a crack in a window that started small, and then spread with each new moment they didn't speak their truth. Ana had been carrying something for weeks, a feeling she couldn't name, a fear she didn't want to admit. It had nothing to do with fame or roles or the pressure of lights and cameras. It was something simpler, something deeper. The feeling of being seen and not recognized, of being close and still alone. And Keanu, with all his calm, with all his quiet kindness, he had noticed. But he didn't press. He never did. He gave space. He gave silence. But sometimes, silence feels too much like distance. And Ana needed something else. She needed to know he would choose to stay, even when she didn't ask so. Tonight, she left the door unlocked, just in case, and he came. Outside, Keanu looked up at the sky. A few stars had returned. The storm had washed the air clean, and there was a scent of something soft in the wind. Maybe jasmine, maybe hope. He didn't mind waiting. Waiting was its own kind of love. He thought back to the last time he saw her laugh. Really laugh. It had been on set, between takes. She was sitting on a crate, holding a paper cup, wearing a ridiculous hat someone had tossed her as a joke. Eyes had crinkled at the edges, her shoulders relaxed. It had been real, not the kind of laugh you give to a camera. Not the kind you offer to keep people from worrying. It had been full, unguarded, and he hadn't seen that laugh since Keanu leaned his head against the wood. The porch creaked beneath his weight, but the house didn't mind. This house had seen things. This house had held her when she collapsed. On the floor after a call from her agent that drained the joy from her, it had caught her tears on its old hardwood, and tonight it would do what it always did offer. Shelter without asking anything in return? Keanu pulled a folded cloth from his coat pocket. It was a scarf. Hers. She'd left it in his car 3 weeks ago. He didn't bring it to return it. He brought it because it still carried her scent. Because sometimes holding a piece of someone helps you stay close when words won't do inside. Anna heard the soft creak again. She stood up slowly. Her feet were bare. The floor was cold, but she didn't care. She moved to the window, pulled the curtain just enough to see him. He was still there, sitting, waiting, not knocking, not calling, just being. A single tear slipped down her cheek, not because she was sad, but because she didn't know how to deserve that kind of presence. Anna turned away from the window, walked quietly to the door. She didn't open it. She just leaned against it from the inside, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of his stillness on the other side. And then, almost too softly to hear, she whispered, "Thank you." Keanu didn't hear the words, but he felt them, and that was enough. They stayed like that. For a long time, a wall between them, but no distance. The night held them both, not together, not apart, just close enough for healing to begin. Sometimes a locked door is louder than silence, but an unlocked one, even if never opened, that's a whisper of trust. And tonight, trust had started to breathe again. The scarf between them came quietly. No alarms, no birds, just soft lights slipping through the blinds. The street outside was still asleep, but the world had begun to turn again. Inside the little blue house, Anna sat on the edge of her couch, her fingers wrapped around a cup of warm tea. She hadn't slept much. Her eyes were heavy. But her heart felt different, like something had softened overnight. She didn't know how long Keanu had stayed outside. She hadn't opened the door. But when she'd finally gotten up and looked again, he was gone. Only the scarf remained, was folded gently on the doormat, as if he wanted her to know he had been there. No message, no note, just that. Her scarf, the one she didn't even know he'd kept. Anna picked it up and held it close. It still smelled like him. Calm, steady, like leather earth. Okay, something else she couldn't name. She sat in silence for a long time. Then she picked up. Her phone opened a new message. Typed his name, but didn't send anything. Instead, she let her fingers hover above the screen, then placed the phone face down on the table and breathed out slow. She wasn't ready to speak, but she wasn't hiding anymore either. Keanu, that same morning, walked along the edge of a park. He didn't go straight home. Something about the night had left a mark on him. He wasn't worried, wasn't trying to fix things. But there was a weight in his chest, not heavy, just present. He stopped near a bench and sat down. An old woman with silver hair walked past and gave him a gentle smile. He nodded, said nothing. The air was still cool, and the day hadn't fully woken up yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Not for lines, not for scripts, just for thoughts. On the top page, he wrote 3 words. The door shifted. He stared at them for a while, then he added another line beneath. Sometimes, silence is a bridge. He closed the book, leaned back, and looked at the sky. Anna spent the rest of the day in quiet tasks. She washed the dishes. She folded a blanket she hadn't touched in weeks. She swept the floor near the doorway, all while wearing the scarf around her neck. It didn't match her outfit. She didn't care. She wasn't dressing for anyone else. She just didn't want to let go of the feeling it gave her, the reminder that someone had waited, had shown up, not to be seen, not to be thanked, just because they cared. By the afternoon, she finally picked up her phone again. This time, she typed slower, and then she pressed send. You sat outside my door? I didn't open it. Well, I didn't. Want you to leave either? Thank you for not knocking. The message was short, but it said everything. Keanu read it an hour later. He didn't smile, not outwardly, but something in him shifted. His hand touched the spot on his coat where the scarf had been. He replied with just 4 words. I'll wait again. Anytime. 2 days passed. No messages. No calls, but something quiet began to return. Anna walked to the store. She smiled at the barista for the first time in weeks. She even picked up an old book she'd started months ago and began reading again from the beginning. It wasn't about fixing everything. It was about feeling like maybe she could stand still without falling apart. And then the unexpected happened. Her agent called. He said a project had fallen through. A big one. It's a kind of role she had already started preparing for. It had been promised. It's nearly signed, but now it was gone. The reason was vague. Something about scheduling, chemistry, and changing direction. It hit her harder than she expected. Not because of the job, but because it made her feel forgotten, replaced, not enough. She hung up without saying much, walked into the kitchen, and sat on the cold tile floor. She didn't cry, but her hands trembled. As she touched her own shoulder, it's like trying to hold herself together, and before she could stop herself, she texted him. It happened again. They said it was nothing personal. It always feels personal. This time the reply came fast. That's because it is personal. It's your heart, your work, your time. You're allowed to feel that. Anna stared at the screen. Those words didn't try to fix her. They just held her softly. She wrote back, I don't want to fall back into the silence. It gets heavy. His reply came almost instantly. Then let me sit in it with you, even if you don't say anything. Later that night, a soft knock came at the door. She stood behind it again, just like before. But this time, she opened it. Keanu didn't say a word. He stood there, holding a paper bag. Inside was a cup of warm miso soup and a fresh baguette. Her favorite kind of quiet comfort. She stepped aside. He walked in. No awkward smiles, no small talk. They sat on the floor of the living room, backs against the couch. She took the soup. He pulled out 2 spoons. They shared the silence. This time, it didn't feel like distance. It felt like something new. Not fixing, just being. Anna leaned her head gently against his shoulder. He didn't move, didn't tense. He just stayed. Steady, she whispered. Barely loud enough to be heard. I hate how much I need this sometimes. Keanu replied softly. We all do. Needing is human. She let her eyes close. For the first time in weeks, she felt sleep start to come, not as an escape, but as rest. That night, before leaving, Keanu stood at the door again. She walked with him. She didn't ask him to stay. He didn't ask to come back. But before he stepped outside, he looked back at her once. If the door's ever locked again, that's okay too. I'll still wait. Anna nodded. It won't be locked. Keanu gave a gentle smile. Not big, not dramatic, just kind, and then he walked out into the night. Anna watched him go. This time, she didn't cry. She just breathed. And the house felt different. Not heavier. Not emptier. Just alive again. Trust is not built in loud moments. It grows in soft ones. And tonight, something had grown. Something they both didn't have words for yet, but it was there. Waiting. Quiet and very real. The letter she never sent. 3 days passed. Anna didn't hear from him, but she didn't feel abandoned. She didn't count the hours. She didn't stare at her phone. She just let the space breathe. It was strange how stillness had become her comfort. Not silence as in emptiness, but silence that meant someone had your back even when they weren't saying anything. She cooked a little again, cleaned the windows, even watered the old plant on the porch that she'd nearly given up on. Its leaves had turned brown at the edges, but now 2 small green shoots had started to grow. She touched them gently. They were quiet proof that not everything broken stays that way. And yet, even in this quiet rhythm, there was one thing she hadn't touched. The letter a year ago, before any Of this, before the long days on set, and before the little pauses that turned into walls, she had written something. Not a script, not a note, but a letter. To him, a raw, clumsy, unfinished letter. It sat folded in a notebook tucked behind her bed. She didn't write it to give it to him. She wrote it to understand what she felt, and maybe to admit it out loud without having to say it. That morning, something inside her told her to read it again. She pulled the notebook out slowly. The pages smelled like dust and memory. She found the letter creased, slightly smudged, but still whole. Her fingers hesitated before opening it, and then she read, "Dear Keanu, you probably won't ever read this. Maybe that's the only reason I can write it, 'cause you're not here to look at me with that kind, impossible calm that always makes me forget how to hide. I think I've been scared to need anyone, scared that if someone gets too close, they'll see everything I try to tuck away, my doubt, my fear, my tiredness. And you see it without me saying a word. Somehow, you never flinch. I hate how gentle you are when I'm trying to be tough. I hate that I want you to stay even when I say I'm fine. I hate that I can't hate you at all. I don't know what this is between us. Maybe it's not meant to be anything more than what it is. But sometimes when you're near me, the noise in my head quiets down and I can breathe. And maybe that's enough. Or maybe I'm lying to myself, because I'm too scared to ask for more. Anna," she closed the letter slowly. Her hands trembled just a little, not from fear, but from truth. That night, Keanu sat on the edge of his bed, turning a small stone over in his hand. It was smooth and dark blue, something she had once picked up on a beach and tossed at him as a joke. He'd kept it, not for the stone itself, but for the memory it held. He'd been thinking about her, not in the way that hurt, but in the way that tugged gently at the corners of his mind. He'd been patient. He always was. But something in his chest was stirring now. He wanted to see her again, not just sit quietly, not just bring soup or sit on the porch. He wanted to ask her something real, something human, the next morning. Anna took the letter, folded it again, and slipped it into her coat pocket. She didn't plan to give it to him, but something told her. Maybe the time was close. Maybe not today, but close. She stepped outside, letting the sun hit her face, and then her phone buzzed. It was him. Coffee, the old place, 11 a.m., no pressure. She stared at the message, then smiled. They met at a small cafe with wooden chairs and chipped mugs. The kind of place where nothing matched, but everything felt warm. He was already there, sitting at the corner table by the window. His hair was tied back. He wore a simple black jacket. When she walked in, he looked up, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. Then he stood and pulled out a chair for her. She sat. Their hands didn't touch. Their words didn't rush. They just looked at each other and let the air between them settle. He spoke first. "You look rested." Nodded. "I've been breathing again. I'm glad." Paused. Then he added softly, "I missed your laugh."
8.
She looked down at her cup. "I missed it too." They talked for nearly an hour. About nothing important. About a movie they both disliked. About a dog he saw that reminded him of a cartoon character. About how she once burnt toast so badly. The fire alarm thought it was an emergency. But somewhere, in the laughter, something real returned. Something warm. Something gentle. When they walked out of the cafe, she hesitated. He noticed. "What is it?" Anna reached into her pocket, pulled out the folded letter, held it in her hand, but didn't give it. Instead, she looked at him and said softly, "Do you believe in almost saying things?" He nodded. "All the time." "Do you ever think maybe it's better to leave some words unsaid?" He thought for a moment, then replied, "Only if silence keeps you safe. Not if it keeps you stuck." Her fingers tightened around the letter. Then she shook her head, placed it back into her pocket. "Not yet. Okay," he said. "No rush." She looked at him. "Why are you always so patient with me?" He smiled. "Because you never needed someone to chase you, just someone to stay near enough." They didn't kiss, they didn't touch. But when she got home later that night, she sat on the edge of her bed, pulled out the letter again, and for the first time, she smiled while holding it. Not because she was ready, but because she was no longer afraid. Across the city, Keanu stood on his balcony, the wind brushing against his hair. He looked out at the lights, then pulled out his notebook again. On a new page, he wrote, "Sometimes the bravest thing is not giving the letter. It's letting someone stay even without it." Closed the notebook, stood in the stillness, and waited for what would come next. The night the lights went out, power went out, just after sunset, a quiet click. Then darkness, no warning, no storm, no wind, just a simple silence that took over the house without asking. Anna stood in her hallway, holding a glass of water, and stared at the ceiling as if the lights might flicker back on if she waited long. If they didn't. The silence wasn't scary, but it was thick too, still too quiet. She walked to the living room window, pulled the curtain, and looked outside. The whole block was out. Dark porches, still street. A cat crossed the road, like it didn't notice the change. Anna turned back toward the kitchen, fumbled for her phone, then paused. Her battery was low. 15%, no flashlight, no messages. She sighed and sat on the floor, letting her back rest against the kitchen cabinets. Then, without thinking, she reached for the scarf again, the one he had left on her porch. She wrapped it around her shoulders, not for warmth, but for comfort, and then she whispered something into the still air. "I'm okay." But even she wasn't sure if she believed it. Keanu was across the city when the lights went out. He noticed it from his balcony, of the sudden shift, the way the street below dipped into darkness. He called her once. No answer. Tried again. Still no answer. He didn't panic, but he felt something. A pull. A quiet instinct. 20 minutes later, she heard a knock. Gentle. Familiar. No doorbell, just that soft knock he always used when he didn't want to startle her. Anna stood slowly. The hallway was dark. She didn't need light to find her way. She opened the door, and there he was, standing, with a small flashlight in one hand and a bag in the other. He didn't say anything right away, just lifted the bag slightly. "I brought candles," he said. She stepped aside. "Come in." They sat on the floor, 2 candles between them. He lit them carefully, placing one near her feet, the other near the edge of the couch. The warm glow filled the room, soft and flickering. Their faces danced with golden light. Anna leaned back against the wall, pulling her knees close. "You always show up when it's dark." Keanu looked at her, his expression calm. "I don't wait for light to decide if you need someone." She looked away for a moment, eyes blinking slower. I used to think needing someone made me weak. And now I think it's the only reason I've stayed standing." They talked for a while, the candles flickering like they were listening. She told him about a dream she had where she forgot her own name. He told her about a film he once did where the only real thing was the silence. Between lines they laughed, a little, sat quietly a lot. At one point, he stood and walked to the window, looked out. The city still slept without light. Then he turned and asked her something he hadn't asked before. "Can I tell you something without it meaning too much?" She tilted her head, yes. He sat beside her again and said, "Sometimes I think I knew you before I met you." She blinked. "What do you mean?" He shrugged gently. "I don't know. There's this part of you that feels familiar. Like you were always supposed to be in the story, just not on the first page." Anna didn't answer right away. She leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling shadows. Then she said softly, "I think that's the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me." He looked down at his hands. It wasn't meant to be kind. True. The candlelight flickered lower now. The shadows danced, and outside, the city stayed still. Anna stood up slowly, walked to the small shelf near the hallway, and returned with something in her hand. The letter, not in the notebook. Anymore, she handed it to him, but didn't speak, just placed it in his hand and sat back down. Keanu held it like it was fragile. He didn't open it, Not yet. He looked at her. She nodded. Double quotes. Not because I need you to read it now, she whispered, but because I don't want to carry it alone anymore. He placed it on the floor beside the candle, not to ignore it, but to honor it. He reached out, touched her hand, not tightly, just enough. I'll read it when the lights come back on, said she smiled. Small true. Double quotes. The rest of the night was slow. They moved to the couch. She pulled a blanket over them both. He leaned back. She rested her head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady and in the dark. No masks were needed. Around 4 in the morning, the lights returned. The refrigerator. HUMMED. The hallway lit up soft. Keanu opened his eyes. Looked at the candle, now just melted wax. He reached for the letter, held it in both hands. Anna stirred, but didn't stop him. He opened it slowly. Read. Each line like it mattered, and when he finished, he didn't speak. He just reached out, gently touched her hair and whispered, "Thank you." She didn't cry, but her eyes shimmered, not because of pain, but because she felt seen completely, finally, and it didn't scare her anymore. Outside, streetlights glowed again, but inside that small blue house, something brighter had already come back, not from electricity, but from being known and loved anyway. When silence became hometh, next few weeks passed like pages turning slowly, not rushed, not dramatic, just steady. Anna and Keanu moved through days like people learning how to live again, not perfectly, not without fear, but with something deeper than confidence. With trust. They didn't label what was between them. They didn't make it a headline. They just allowed it to breathe. One afternoon, Yana stood in front of a mirror, reading lines for a small indie script. It wasn't a big project, wasn't full of lights or noise, but there was heart in it. For the first time in months, she didn't care how many people would watch. She just wanted to feel something again when she acted. She finished the scene, looked into her own eyes in the reflection, and whispered, "You're allowed to be new." She didn't mean perfect. She meant real. Keanu watched from the hallway, leaning against the doorframe. He didn't clap, didn't interrupt, just smiled quietly, like he was seeing someone arrive home to herself. Anna turned and noticed him. He raised an eyebrow playfully. "So, are you back?" Shook her head. "No then," added with a soft smile. "I'm just starting." That night she cooked. Not because she had to, because she wanted to. Keanu set the table too. Bowls, 2 glasses, and a candle in the middle. Not for romance, just for light. They sat across from each. No phones, no noise. Anna reached across the table and touched his hand. "You know what scares me?" she asked. "What?" "That one day the quiet won't be enough for you. That you'll want something louder." He looked at her, calm. "I've lived in loud rooms, Anna. They never heard me, but I do. Always." Later, as they cleaned the dishes, Anna stopped suddenly. Her eyes landed on the scarf. It still hung by the door, where she had placed it weeks ago. She picked it up, ran her fingers across the fabric, then handed it to him. "You left this for me." He nodded. Double quotes. "Yeah, double quotes. I want to give it back to you." "Why?" "'Cause I'm not hiding behind it anymore." He didn't say anything, just folded the scarf slowly and placed it in his coat pocket. The doorbell rang around midnight. Not loud, just enough to stir the quiet Anna. I looked at Keanu. They weren't expecting anyone. She walked to the door, opened it carefully. It was a neighbor, an older woman who lived 2 doors down. Her hands were shaking, her voice uncertain. Her dog had run off in the storm. She needed help. Anna didn't hesitate. She grabbed a flashlight and stepped out. Keanu followed her. Without a word, they walked through wet grass. Calling the dog's name, Anna's voice was strong, clear, not afraid. Keanu watched her from behind, something proud and gentle rising in his chest. This was the same woman who once sat in silence on the floor of her living room, afraid to be seen now. She was moving through the night, offering calm to someone else. They found the dog under a neighbor's car, shivering, scared. Anna got down on her knees, spoke softly, and held out her hand. The dog came slowly, trusted her, and she scooped it up, wrapping it in her coat back at the neighbor's porch. The woman cried and hugged Anna tightly. Anna didn't step back. She held her, let the woman cry into her shoulder, and when it was done, she said simply, "You're safe now." The woman whispered, "Thank you." Anna smiled and looked at Keanu. "He showed me how to wait for the door to open," she said. The woman didn't understand, but Keanu did. His eyes softened. They walked home in silence this time. Not to avoid words, but because nothing needed to be said back inside. The house felt warm. The candle was still burning. Anna pulled the scarf from his pocket and laid it gently across the arm of the couch. She looked at him, standing near the window, then asked quietly, "Do you ever wonder if we were meant to find each other?" Keanu thought for a long time, then said, "I don't believe in fate." She raised her eyebrows. Surprised, really? "I believe in choice." He stepped closer. "You chose to leave the door unlocked. You chose to open it again. You chose to hand me the letter. And I chose to wait, every time." Anna's eyes shimmered. "So we chose this?" "Yes, again and again, every day." She smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because she wasn't alone in choosing. Anymore, she walked over to him, stood close. Their hands met, and this time she kissed him. Not rushed, not dramatic, just slow and honest, like a conversation. In silence, when they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his and whispered, "Thank you for standing at the door." He smiled. "Thank you for unlocking it." And in that moment, the door wasn't just a door anymore. It was a beginning outside. The night stretched quiet and kind. Inside, two people stood in the soft light, not waiting for something to break, but ready for what would grow. Not perfect, not finished, but together. And that was more than enough. The words between breaths, the morning after he read the letter, felt different. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet in a softer way. Keanu didn't say much when he woke up. Anna didn't either. They both moved through the kitchen like a silent dance. She made toast. He brewed tea. Neither of them asked what came next. Neither needed to. They were no longer dancing around the silence. They were inside it. And for the first time, it didn't feel like hiding. It felt like peace. Anna leaned against the counter. Watching the steam rise from her mug, Keanu stood across. From her arms crossed gently, eyes steady. She broke the silence first. "Did it scare you?" "The letter," he shook his head. "No, not even the parts where I said I hated needing someone, especially those parts." She blinked. "Why?" He stepped closer, slowly, "Because it meant you let yourself be real. Not perfect, not polished, just human." Anna took a slow breath, then gave a small laugh. "I keep waiting for you to be wrong about me." Keanu's voice was calm. "You don't have to be who you were yesterday, or who people expect. You just have to be here." They sat by the window that afternoon, watching the sky darken again. A light rain had started, soft, steady. Anna rested, her head on the glass. "Do you think healing happens in one big moment, or little ones?" Keanu answered without thinking. "Little ones, the quiet ones. It's like when you open the door and someone's already standing there." She smiled, eyes still. "On the street, I never told you the real reason I left the door unlocked that night." He looked at her, curious. She turned to him, voice low. "Because I knew if I didn't, I'd lose you. And I wasn't ready for that." He didn't rush to reply. He let the moment settle, then said, "You didn't lose me. You found me in your silence." Later that evening, they took a walk. No umbrellas, just the rain, just each other. The world was quieter in the mist. Trees looked softer, the pavement darker. Cars passed slowly, headlights reflecting off wet streets. Anna looked up and whispered, "Can I tell you something without you answering?" Keanu nodded, double quotes always. She paused. then said, I used to think love was about grand moments, big gestures, dramatic scenes. But now, I think love is when someone shows up, sits with you on the floor, and doesn't ask you to smile. They just wait for your breathing to even out. She didn't look at him. She didn't need to. His silence said everything. They reached a bench. At the edge of the park, sat down. The rain had lightened Anna, pulled her coat tighter, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled photograph. She handed it to him. It was her as a child, barefoot, laughing, her eyes closed, hair wild in the wind. Keanu stared at it, then looked at her. I forgot she existed, she said. He handed the photo back gently. She's still. Here. Where? He touched her chest, just above her heart. Right here, waiting for you to believe in her again. Anna stared at the spot he touched, then leaned into him, letting her head fall against his shoulder. The rain fell again, soft and slow. No one else was around, just them. And a quiet understanding that some things don't need to be defined to be real. They walked back in the dark. The porch light flickered twice. It's like always. But this time, it stayed on. Anna unlocked the door. Keanu stepped inside behind her, and she said something she hadn't said in a very long time. Stay. Not out of fear, not out of sadness, but out of knowing, out of choice. He nodded once, took off his coat, and stayed. They sat on the couch with a blanket wrapped around them. A movie played on low volume. But neither of them really watched. Anna turned to him, eyes soft. Do you think we're broken people? Keanu thought for a moment, then answered, double quotes, no. I think we're just people who've been through enough to understand the quiet matters. She closed her eyes and whispered, I'm not scared of the quiet anymore. Neither was he. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, two people sat close, not trying to fix each other, not filling the air with promises, but just being sometimes. The bravest thing is not saying everything. It's choosing to stay when it would be easier to go. And Keanu had stayed, not as a savior, not as a solution, but as someone who knew what it felt like to be on the other side of a locked door and who waited long enough to be let in.